So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move on with our next presentation. Now, the topic, Solidify Customer Trust with Secure Digital Transactions in BFSI. Our speaker is Ramesh Nagarajan, Sales Lead APJ, Digital Payments Security from Outseer. Let's welcome Ramesh, please.
Nice to see you all. And one of the benefits of me getting into the stage, I told, is I can remove the mask. So I can speak freely and you can see my face. Anyway, so thanks everyone for attending this conference. And I'm glad to be here in terms of speaking about, in terms of the new normal. I think the previous session was about new normal. And this pandemic has created a whole bunch of ruckus. But even before the pandemic, we have seen changing attitudes with respect to customer behavior and the security that goes behind the scenes as well. So today we'll be talking about how do we actually solidify the customer trust with the digital transactions. So first and foremost, I don't need to delve too much into this topic, but essentially the thing is we have changed a lot in the last 2 years. There was a McKinsey study that said something like, we have changed in terms of the number of years it took for us to get adopted into watching Netflix or shopping online or doing any kind of things that we do online in terms of from a years to a matter of days, for example. So we have adopted that much faster with respect to how the pandemic has forced us to. So how we live, how we shop, who we trust, the most important thing has all changed. So in terms of the who we trust, it's interesting because the previous speaking was talking about NFTs and metaverse and all these other things, but there's a key component that's also developing as well, which is in the embedded payment space. You know, in terms of where customers are actually buying and who they are trusting is actually changing, not necessarily the banking terminal or point of sale, but in terms of the alternate channels that customers are getting into, including IoTs. So the first three key questions that any enterprise, fintechs, banking, finance, anyone for that matter, any other industry is looking into is how do I manage with respect to seamless experiences because the customer behavior patterns are continuously changing and they're actually demanding more and more with respect to better experiences. And if you're not doing that, your competition is or fintech is. So how do we actually manage that? And underlying that is how do we actually manage with respect to customer trust? Because as we all know, there's an opportunity in the payment space or digital transformation or BNPL or whatever we're talking about, there's opportunity for fraudsters as well. They actually want to get online, the same space that our customers want to get online and actually want to benefit from this growth as well. So we need to mitigate fraud and we need to protect customers because all the regulators around the world, I was speaking at a conference a couple of weeks ago in Philippines, talking about regulators in Philippines, and before that was in Indonesia. So all the regulators around the world are united in one thing is to ensure there is a strong customer authentication being provided to maintain trust in the system because even if one of the banks actually fall behind, then you're looking at trust within the whole banking arena. So this is some of the research that we did as a company, and I'll get to who we are and what we do at the end of the day. Essentially, we're looking at a number of attacks detected by Outseer. So Outseer, at the very high level, we are an RSA company. We've been in the industry for over more than 3 decades. We are in the payment authentication and anti-fraud solutions provider. We also look at fraud intelligence as well. We look at the dark web. We look at the surface web. We work with certain 3-letter agencies around the world. We work with something like 6,000 institutions, banking institutions around the world to provide this fraud information, fraud landscape. And essentially, we have our own anti-fraud command center where we are actually looking at the number of incidences, as you can read on the screen, is in terms of stolen credentials, synthetic identity fraud, which is very rampant in the buy now, pay later arena. And looking at personally identified information as well, where fraudsters are actually using to actually do a takeover attack. So we call it ATO, which is account takeover. So this is some of the things that came out in the recent report. We are more than happy to share that with the audience. Look at the number of digital banking fraud that's happened the last year or so. This is quarter-on-quarter increase, 68% that's come from in the mobile channels. So the fraudsters are actually using all kinds of different rogue apps, installing themselves as the bank. From the customer's point of view, they really need to be educated to know which one is real and which one is not. But essentially, they are downloading it and they are going through rogue apps, and fraudsters purporting as banks are actually trying to reach to these customers. Something in the sense of brand abuse attacks, about 274% in the last year and quarter-on-quarter as well. And the first one is the 3D secure, so essentially card not present. When we are looking at the information in the wild, as in the dark web, we look at close to 13 million credit cards that's in the dark web that's been actively used by the fraudsters to actually launch an attack or take over someone's identity and do the online shopping and things like that. So all it takes is just one or two incidences, and the whole banking structure or the architecture will come into question. So this is from an e-commerce perspective. This is what we are looking from an e-commerce growth as well. But you can look at the gross fraud in terms of billions. So as e-commerce is growing, the fraud is actually growing almost in a lockstep mechanism as well. So I spoke about some of those things in the previous slide, but I won't repeat it. But this is a real opportunity in terms of risk management. So essentially, from a fraud attacks worldwide perspective, we're talking about brand abuse, phishing. So the interesting thing I came across is I was talking to one of the banks, and they said we have a pretty good phishing mechanism. We are reaching out to our customers, and we are continuously educating them. Now, my question is, how does a man on the street or woman on the street exactly know this is your bank? Because the fraudsters are very, very good in coming with a spear phishing attack. They can give exactly the same details as a bank would. In fact, I was talking to my mother 3 weeks ago, and she got a call. Someone from, this is from India, and they called, I'm calling from this bank. Can you please share your OTP? Because we would love to help you with respect to setting up your accounts and things like that. She's in a retirement account. So how does she know that this is the bank that she's dealing with? And this is as genuine. It comes from the same number. The email comes from the same bank as well. So how do you know this is a bank? So this is still a large question that we all need to solve, is who do you say you are? That still is not clear in spite of all the things that we put in place as from a bank perspective. So these are some of the news. Primarily, it's kind of a Philippine-based kind of news, but I don't want to single out one country. This is prevalent anywhere. I was talking to some Indian banks last week, and India is the #1 phishing hosting site in the world right now. And the amount of phishing attacks that are happening in India is tremendous. Philippines is #4. In terms of ASEAN, you're looking at a lot of phishing attacks. A lot of cyber criminals are actually setting up fake websites and things like that to harvest credentials. So essentially, this is continuous. And this is not just from a banking arena, but it's also going through government. It's going through healthcare. We're going through various different parts, even defense. Defense is not alone either. So police force, defense, some Indonesian defense got attacked. So they're looking at all kinds of different ways to actually get in. And so this is real. So who we are. So as I mentioned, we are about 30-year-old company as a brand from RSA. We are a spin-off. We created a new brand called Outseer as of last year. We are one of the 4 sister concerns that RSA manages at the umbrella company. And our focus is very, very clear. So we want to help customers, banking, financial institutions manage fraud, anti-fraud solutions, payment authentication, and providing a fraud intelligence service to actually help manage it. How do we do it? Our core of the technology is we use behavioral-based authentication. So we actually look at risk profile of individual customers. We use AI/ML. We use several different identity models and predictors to come up with a risk score that tells you whether your customers who are logging in, whether they're genuine or fraudulent. And we continuously do a self-learning. We manage the patterns to ensure that the person is able to log in through internet and mobile banking, or the ones that are the genuine person. Or that, for that matter, we also do dark web interactions as well to get information about the customer. Even if it's a new customer, for example, we'll be able to understand the IPs, the device locations, several different predictors in terms of velocity checks and things like that, time of day access. So, and we work with around 6,000 institutions worldwide and with certain law enforcement as well to continuously give this information. So my focus is very simple. If the bad guys are working together, I think it's high time that the good guys work as well. So we need to work together to actually form a consortium to protect against the customer. So that is from a science perspective. We have a global data network, which is what I talked about. We continuously provide information to with our customer base, with our partners. We have strong leadership in terms of, we work with 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐭. I'll cover later on the slide. And we have expertise on the ground in Asia Pacific, actually, and around the world. We work with some majors in the banking arena to actually continuously help the banks to set up this kind of a anti-fraud program. So at a very high level, we are looking at some of this malware, the dark web. I mentioned some of these before in my previous slides. But essentially, if you think from a customer's perspective, the customer is just one. And we are looking at all different kinds of systems to identify who the customer is. From the customer's point of view, I'm just one person trying to access this. But as a banking and finance, we need to identify whether the person is genuine or not. So all of this actually happens in the background. We are looking at several different unauthorized access, password guessing, credential stuffing, man in the middle, and someone taking over sessions, for example, and account takeover. I mean, we all shared LinkedIn, including me. But essentially, the fraudsters are actually using LinkedIn as a form of communication as well, to get information about yourselves and who they can actually target and write a very, very nice specific email to actually get your trust. And you work with some of the biometrics in terms of new account registration as well. So at the end of the day, we are looking at the full spectrum of how a genuine customer is interacting, but genuine customer could be fraudulent. So we need to make sure there's checks in every single step of the way. So at a very high level, this is what we provide. On the far right, you have a fraud manager. Essentially, we're very closely with the identity management solution. I have many years' experience in identity management. So what we do is we work with our internet and mobile banking teams to identify where we can look at customer authentication, because we are real time. We work with customers as in end customers as they're logging in. So it's a transaction monitoring, basically. So every single authentication needs to be looked at risk profile. And it's not just at the login, but we are looking at continuous monitoring as well. Fraud action is something that we provide as a service. We can take down any service within a matter of hours. We work with some of the, as I mentioned, ISPs, law enforcement, to actually take down some of those phishing sites. And 3D Secure is basically looking at a high-level view of card non-present transactions, where you're looking at, as part of your digital transformation, people are actually using your websites for shopping and things like that. They go through this particular service. So this is some of the things you actually see. I'll just quickly go through WhatsApp-based messages, Telegram, things like people actually using fraudsters or using some of these groups. They're coming with their own bank. Just a couple of India examples here. Their own bank and logos, everything. This is you name it. It looks legit. So back to the fraud action. Some of the highlights here is we look at about 23 million recovered cards, which is in 2020. Last year it was 13 million. So this is real cards, by the way. So this is all real customer information. We're looking at a full account enrollment strategy as well as part of a new customer onboarding. I think I heard a couple of other speeches where they're talking about how do we actually get customers onboarded. So this is a continuous authentication all the way from biometric enrollment to identifying customers and being part of the system and making sure that they're still genuine customers and they're not taken over by. One of the main questions I ask is that as a bank, you're looking at a customer as different parts. But the customer is also not focusing only on the bank as a browser or mobile app. They actually are going through several different websites, which we have no idea about. In which case, we need to identify how the customer is actually using our platform, while at the same time not using, not have some kind of a malware in the system because they visited so many different websites and things like that. So that's a very challenging thing that we need to, ensure the customers are taken care of. From the 3D Secure, one of the claim to fame is in terms of the fraud detection rate. We have something like 95% fraud detection with less than 5% intervention. So essentially looking at frictionless, which is seamless authentication. And it's pretty much in the industry lead from that perspective. And 98% of the transactions go through. So there is it's almost like a silent authentication. One of the biggest issues here is as banks, we are looking at ASEAN region. Not all countries are looking at seamless as a method or metric. Someone actually uses a 100% challenge. Like, for example, India actually uses 100% challenge. How do you actually balance this with respect to seamless authentication as well as providing security? So this is some of the, we work with Visa, MasterCard schemes, American Express. We work with 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐭 and securities, PCI. And we work with the analysts as well. So essentially, we have a full suite of people who we work with, identify trends, the latest trends that are coming up from a fraud perspective. We are able to work with them to protect the customers. Some eye chart here. So some of the banks that we work globally. So essentially, our motto is very simple. We want to stop fraud, not customers. So we have stopping fraud risk should not be coming at the expense of stopping the customer, because all the banks I've spoken to recently, they all want to grow their customer base. They all want to be that bank, be the financial institution, be that fintech, want to take the unbanked customer and provide financial inclusion and financial literacy to actually take we are looking at 60, 40, 50% of unbanked customers, depending on the countries you're talking to get into the banking side of things. So for that to happen, we want to encourage growth, but we also want to make sure that fraud is stopped as well. So with that, I conclude the presentation, and unfortunately, I need to go back into my mask. So thank you for listening.